All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mr. McLogan, and this is week number 94. Open about how to stay motivated with your math, because one of the things that has been going on, obviously through the school year, so it's been a difficult, I think, last couple of years as far as how we've transitioned from this new kind of online learning and schooling, and there's been a lot of changes. So how do you kind of remain motivated with that? And that's some of the things I want to talk about in this live stream, as well as also answer your questions. So I had a lot of students that submitted some questions into me that we'll be go ahead and getting to after we kind of talk about the motivation part of it. And then also, if you have questions that you would like for me to answer, I'll be able to take them for you guys on the chat after I have gone through kind of the questions that were pre-submitted. But the best way to always get your questions into me is to have them pre-submitted at brianmclogan.com/Q&A. There's also a Discord server that you can go ahead and utilize as well to get a little bit quicker response back on your questions. That is a Discord server that is basically open for students that are there to ask questions and for students to help each other out. So if you have not already checked out the Discord server, I'd highly recommend that you go there. And then also every week at Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will answer your guys' questions. So feel free to always jump in and shoot them in on the link. And again, that is also pinned for you guys in on the chat. So, what's up, Carl and Miles and Boyne and Sam and Daniel and Yana and John and Paul and Carl and Marcus. Good to have all of you guys on here. Wow, there's also, guys, I will be going to a lot of questions, but again, all the math and stuff like that. What I want to do is I want to kind of start with the how to get motivated. And then what I'll do is I will kind of jump in and answer any of your guys' questions a little bit before we get into the math. And then after the end, if you guys have any other general questions, that's kind of like the open live Q&A portion. We'll kind of get into there. So let's talk about, I kind of want to get right into it. Let's talk about how to stay motivated. And this is my first year, obviously, not being inside the classroom, and it's a little bit difficult. I actually had to kind of think about it. I'm like, oh my God, it's because I was looking at our district calendar, and I realized that the first quarter is over with, and at least at my school. And I know that we, in Florida, we start a little bit earlier than other schools. So therefore, if we're finished, then I know that other schools might have also been finished, or they are getting really close to finishing off quarter one. So a couple of points that I think it's important to understand where we're at. A lot of that kind of motivations that a lot of students start the school year off with kind of start to wane by the end of quarter one. And a lot of people, have high aspirations, or, they have a big work ethic. But guess what? You start a new school, you have new classes, you have new teachers, you're doing different clubs and sports. Maybe you're taking classes that you start to struggle in that you never did, or you're not understanding things like you were expecting, and really just life kind of gets in the way. And what I've heard from a lot of students is, how do I remain motivated to kind of chase those, goals that I kind of set up from the beginning of the year, because it is a long school year, right? I mean, if we just passed quarter one, we still got 3 more quarters to go. So we're not even halfway that. And how are we going to maintain this kind of enthusiasm and work ethic throughout the year? So what I want to do is kind of cover a couple of tips that have worked for me as far as whenever I wanted to continue being motivated and constantly pursuing something that I've wanted to go after. And I think the first thing is, obviously, you gotta have your goals, whatever it is for your class or in school, graduation, whatever. But I think it's more importantly, not just to have those, but to write them down. So write down those goals that you have, whatever your purpose of why if you can't stay motivated, what is it you want to be motivated for? Why is it you're trying to get motivated for your class? What are you trying to achieve? Write down those goals. And I think it's also important to write them down and put them on your computer, put them in your desk. You need to see them each and every day. One of the things that also I do is, a lot of times, I talk about my goals. I look at them each and every day, each and every week. I'm writing down tasks that I'm doing to help me achieve those goals. But when you wake up in the morning and the first thing that you do is again look at your goals that you wrote, let's say in August or July, you're mentally putting yourself in that position of saying, whatever I'm going to be doing today is needs to be helping me achieve that goal. All right. And because I think what a lot of times what happens is, life gets in the way. But if you don't have your goal of what you're trying to achieve and why you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to achieve it front and center for you each and every day, well, what's going to happen, right? You're going to start, drifting off away from your goal. And what happens is a lot of students then, that's where that lack of motivation kind of comes in, because they kind of get so disconnected in what their original purpose of what they were trying to achieve. And so I think it's really important when you are trying to stay motivated, or you have to understand what are you trying to be motivated for. Write down that goal and look at that goal, read that goal, write down that goal each and every day. I also think it's important to also attach that kind of the context of that goal, like why, kind of like the why, like what is the purpose, what is the reasoning behind you having that goal, why is it so important for you, and write that stuff down and read it and look at it. And you can obviously make adjustments throughout the years, or throughout time on that goal. Nothing has to be set in stone, but I think it's really, really important for you to kind of remember why you're doing what you're doing each and every day. Because guys, anytime you're chasing your goal, or and you're in schooling and everything, it's not easy. There's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be hills you're going to have to climb. And I think the most important thing is when the times get tough is to know the reason of what you're doing, and why you're doing it. What are you doing it for? And I think those are the things that can a lot of times hold people together into that major goal. And because when times get tough and you're like, I'm just not motivated. Like tonight, I didn't want to go live. I have a little bit of a sickness, and just for my kids got thing, and I think we've all had colds. And I was like, I'm really, really tired. I'm like, it's really tough for me to go live tonight. But I was like, you know what? This is one of my goals is obviously going live, and, the reasonings behind that and why I do that. And, so here I am showing up for you guys on a live session. So I think writing down the goals, the purpose, writing them down, reading them each and every day is very simple. Another thing as far as motivation goes, I think one of the best things for motivation is keeping it simple. And what I mean by that is removing your barriers, removing things that are going to kind of prevent you from doing things that you don't want to do. A lot of times and what I mean by this is, for instance, like, let's say, whatever your goal is, motivation, but let's say for you to do that, let's say you're like getting an A, right? Or whatever. So you're going to have to study, right? Well, I think one of the main things to do is try to make that as easy as possible. So if that means that, you have to, I don't know, go, the next morning you want to study in the morning. Well, guess what? Get your book out, open it up to your chapter, right? So therefore, literally when you wake up, you can go right to your book and open up, and that's like, you're ready to study. Like, but what happens is like, oh, if you leave your car, like, let's say you leave your book in the car, then when you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, now I have to go to my car and go and get it. And then I have to go back, bring it back inside, figure out where I'm at, right? And then start studying. You can see like all these layers of all these layers of kind of friction that you have to go through just to get into the studying. And what I'm trying to make the point that I'm trying to address here is when sometimes when you have that little lack of motivation, and again, it's just going to be natural, right? You're not always going to be extremely motivated, even when you look at those goals and you have the reason, you're just like, I just don't want to do this, or I just don't have the motivation. The easier you can make it on yourself to accomplish what you need to accomplish, the more likely it's going to get done, right? But if you are bringing up a whole bunch of kind of barriers where you're going to have to overcome to get that to achieve, to do what you need to do, it's just going to further flame that kind of lack of motivation. You're like, oh well, now I have to go over to my friend's house, or I have to schedule this. Like the more barriers that you have to, or kind of hurdles you have to jump, the easier it's going to be to continue that lack of motivation. And then I think the third thing that I do, so we have the writing the goals, we have kind of like keep it simple, remove barriers. And then the third one that I'd recommend for you guys is to change it up. And this is, I think, just one of the easiest things to do. Is I think a lot of times we get so stuck in our ways that we sometimes remember to get a little bit better, we got to change our, kind of situation. We got to change our atmosphere. Like if we're studying, like I remember in college, I could only study at the same spot like 3 times. Then I had to move because what would happen is I'd get to that same spot. Like once I got to there like 4 or 5 times, I would just get so distracted. I would stop wanting to I just could not study at that same spot. So I literally had to every 2 to 3 times that I was going to be studying, I would just move to different areas. I go to the library, I go into the coffee shop, I went to the basement. I was just always going to different spots to move it along, trying to keep that kind of freshness factor in me, because I think when you have a long year, you've been doing something over and over and over, and especially like studying for math, it can get very repetitive and very boring, right? And kind of very lonely. So, maybe sometimes you're studying by yourself, maybe then sometimes get some friends, or maybe sometimes do it with the study group. There's a whole bunch of things that you guys could definitely, sorry, hold on a second. Come on. All right. Hold on a second. Perfect. Okay. But there's a whole bunch of that repetition that I think that when you're kind of changing things up, and when you're changing things up and just trying to give that kind of freshness, that's going to kind of help reset yourself. And I think that's just really important when that motivation, because you can have the goals, right? You can remove those barriers, but when things just kind of feel stale and you don't really feel like there's that kind of, kind of that uniqueness of what you're trying to do, that's where that kind of changing it up will help you guys out. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know guys in the comments if you have anything else you want to add to that, or if there was anything else you want me to elaborate on. But hopefully that was beneficial for you guys. I will say hi to a couple of you on Earth here, or maybe see if I can answer some questions before let's get into the math. And then these are some of the questions, again, that students submitted at brianmclogan.com/Q&A. And then after that, we'll maybe go into some live streams from there. So, hey, Josh and Sid and Ihan, Addie, Upsana, and Dakron and Matt. Hello, everybody. Good to have you on. So, Ian says, I have a big Pythagorean theorem test I'm going to cover tomorrow. Well, actually, I have something that I think might help you out, which I'm going to talk about. And well, good, Chrissy. I'm glad some of the things made some sense and connected for in there. Because it's definitely, I just wrote down some kind of bullet points that I was writing out. But I didn't like rehearse any of that for you guys. So I'm glad at least it came out and made some sense for you. Well, you're very welcome, Dr. Starker. Don't have any of my chem, but hopefully at least my math helped you out right there. Cool. Let's see. Harp says, maybe motivation should not be the way of encouragement and only mean getting work done. Perhaps one must become self-disciplined, and when progress is made, this causes, I think definitely, I definitely think there's some truth in everything else with that. And hopefully, I don't think you have to love math to be motivated. Everything that you, like I said, that's where I think when you don't love the subject or the content, you got to look for a bigger why, right? Not everybody loves going to work or whatever else, but it's like if there's a purpose and a reason of what you're doing and why you're doing it, that's going to get you through some of those tougher times, right? There's going to be classes you love, and going to class is the easiest thing to do. But then there's also going to be classes you don't like. There's going to be teachers you don't like. But I think a lot of times you got to look beyond that to be able to gather a lot of that motivation. And to go, very, very welcome. That's a good one, Faye. So how do I stay motivated? Yeah, I think you just got to realize, like, what is it you need with the math in your music, compared to, or for your degree and then pursuing music. I think there's also some balance that you got to understand in that realm. Not everything needs to be equally divided, right? But also you can't just say, oh, I'm music, so I'm not going to do math, or I don't need to know math, right? Everything is a balance. And, maybe it's an 80-20, maybe it's a 90-10, but just because you might be strong in something, just don't think that doesn't mean you shouldn't study or you can't study, or you're not capable of studying other content. Okay. So make I don't know any more of that full situation, but I definitely make sure that, don't just disregard math because you're like, oh, I'm going to be music. Well, things in life change, and you never know exactly what you're going to need when you're going to need it. So obviously I would say, yeah, don't stress over, for math, maybe being 50-50, but you should definitely, have the things definitely separated, for you to putting more weight probably in your music, but still make sure you're, following whatever math that you need, or putting in that time, effort, and attention into the math, that whatever you need for your degree. Jasmine, well, I think a lot of preventing the procrastination comes into like really building up that motivation, in reality, if you do everything that I kind of talked about from up front, I think that's going to definitely help you out for the procrastination. Well, you got to look at why your marks are still getting poorly, obviously there's a disconnect in studying, and you can study a lot, you can do a ton of math problems and still get the problems wrong. So you got to be able to figure out where's that disconnect and why is that happening. And hey, Izza, Dan Nizzle, how are you? Oh, well, this is very good, Addie. This is a lot of times Addie's like very, very quick. Be able getting a lot of students my questions, or a lot of times the students are looking for a particular video. So I'm glad that she's helping you guys get through that. Bro, I'm actually going to answer one of these questions. That is, that's going to be coming up. Karen, wrestling is better. Yeah, completely different. One individual sport and a team sport. I will say, I haven't done a lot of individual sports, but I would say wrestling was, I think, one of the better individual sports because, just like any other individual sport, you can only blame the only person you can blame is yourself, right? And I think there is it's one of those difficult, sports where, I've just been completely exhausted being on the mat. And I think it's amazing that wrestling, puts you to that test, and it's like you and another guy, and a girl and another girl, like you going at it. And I think with rugby, one of the most amazing things that I did with rugby, I played a lot more, team sports, but I think rugby has been the most pure team sport that I ever played. And that's how I definitely, describe from those two. And I love vaping. Did you take college algebra? Well, thank you so much for the super chat. And yes, I did take college algebra. So I did, even though if you guys know my story, I failed in pre-calculus, or I didn't fail. I got a D in pre-calculus in college. And then I was able to, from there, once I failed on that, then I tested into a college algebra class. So I actually had to take college algebra, which was really good because I needed it. Yes, coffee is very helpful. I feel like a lot of exam questions are so much harder than the questions given for homework in class. So I'm going to talk about this. So I am going to get to these on how to practice. That's going to be one of the things actually I'm going to talk about. And maybe I'll even add this into my live stream as well. Arbor, if you can type in, should we memorize the unit circle into YouTube? I have a video explaining just that. And to give you the short answer, no, you should not have to memorize the unit circle, but you should at least know the first quadrant and transformations. I told you I will talk about that, and we're going to get to them. And I love it. Thank you so much for that. How do you study smarter, not harder? Kara, I'm going to talk about that one. That's a question that somebody proposed. So I'll get to that one, guys, in just a second. Oh, well, sweet. Well, let's give, what's his name? Mr. Sin a shout out. Well, congratulations. I think 87,000 subscribers is absolutely amazing. And I think it's really cool that he's been helping you out, especially your teacher. That's awesome. All right. Man, everybody's talking about studying today. This is so crazy. So I will be doing the studying. I'll be definitely getting I'll be talking about some studying material for you guys, okay? And then, yes, this is recording. The recordings always stay up. So, all right, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over now to the math content. I think I have 8 questions that were submitted, but one of the questions that has been going on and on and on in this live chat is like studying. So I am going to talk about that. I think it's question number, question number 5. So let's go and get into the math, and then we'll cover question number 5. And I might sneeze. But I put my tongue to the top of my mouth, and I do not sneeze. It's amazing. Oh, okay. Okay. So let's, I am going to actually change this though to keep everything going smoothly. I'm going to change the chat to subscribers because when I get into the math, I'm not able to look into all of your guys' stuff. So I'm going to change the chat to subscribers. Sorry guys, but you should subscribe anyways. I'd really appreciate it. Especially as I'm getting closer and closer to 1 million subscribers. So I appreciate all of you that want to join as subscribers. And then after I'm done with this, I will turn it back into for everybody to go ahead and submit any kind of questions. But let's just go and get into the math. And so, what? No, it's supposed to be open. Well, so it was going to be for, I said so for subscribers. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's get into the math. Let's switch this over for you guys, and then you guys can see. There we go. All right. So the first question that we have says solve and write your answer in interval notation. So this is a exponential inequality. No, I'm going to do red. Okay, so the first thing, I'm just going to kind of treat this like an equation. First of all, I'm not really going to be worried about the inequality sign. The main thing is when I have an exponential, I want to kind of get them into the same base. And the one thing I noticed about 64 and 16, those are both going to be multiples of 4, meaning I can rewrite these as a 4 cubed raised to the 2x, right, is greater than or equal to a 4 squared raised to the x plus 1. Now, why is this important? Well, again, because if I have this both saying, if I have these both set, actually, hold on a second. Actually, I didn't even check it. Does that? I'm actually not 100% on this. Well, let's go ahead and try it the way I would, and let's see if that makes sense. And if it does, then we'll work from there. So I was actually checking. I was like, actually, I use the one-to-one property for equations, but I'm assuming for the inequality it would work, but if anybody has any other option for there, I actually can, because actually this is the reason why I selected this problem or chose it, because I'm like, actually I haven't done a problem like this. But the reason why a lot of times I don't do problems I haven't done, because I was like, hey, actually, is this mathematically actually going to be possible? So, or probable. So let's see, let's go ahead and rewrite this as 4 to the 6x is greater than or equal to 4 to the, distribute that, 2x plus 2, okay? Now, assuming that this one-to-one property works on this, then therefore, since they have the same base, like again, if I said like 2 to the x equals 2 cubed, right? Well, then what does x have to be? Oh, well, x has to equal 3, right? That's how that's one-to-one property works for equations. And so in this case, if I have them both as a base 4, I can just set this as 2x is greater than or equal to 2x plus 2, right? Well, now it's just going to be solving. So I'll subtract a 2x, and I get a 4x is greater than or equal to 2. Divide by 4, and x is going to be greater than or equal to 1/2. And as far as I see, as long as x is greater than or equal to 1/2, it looks like that's going to work. And I'd probably actually check this like graphically again, just to double check, but I think algebraically, just for the sake of time, I'm going to continue on with this, but I will put an asterisk in there, hopefully, but I'm going from there. All right. So let's go and look into question number 2. Question number 2 says, use the properties of logarithms to expand the expression. All right, so when we're expanding the expression, we can use the quotient property, the product property, and the power property. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to break apart this quotient. Okay, so that quotient property allows me to say I can take log of 5, x squared y to the 9th, and then that would be minus log base 5 of 25. Okay. Then if I wanted to further break this apart, I can break this apart using multiplication, right? So then I can say, am I going to have enough? Yeah, I'll have enough space. So I can say log base 5 of x squared plus log base 5 of y to the 9th minus log base 5 of 25. Then the power rule allows us to basically take any number in front and be able to run that in, or any number as a power and run that in front. Now I could simplify this, right? Because 5 raised to what power is actually equal to 25? And that answer is 2. So I can actually further simplify this. So I could say 2 log base 5 of x plus a 9 log base 5 of y. And then this is actually equal to 2. And there you go. Now this one says use the property of logarithms to condense. And whenever we're talking about condensing, what we're trying to do is actually rewrite them as one single logarithm. So in this case, what I'm going to do is everything that I just did here, I'm going to do it backwards. So now I'm going to take the 7 and I'm going to rewrite that up front. So now it's going to be log base m of y to the 7th minus a log base m of q. I don't know why that's a horrible q. Of q squared, and that's going to be raised to the 3rd power. Well, obviously I can simplify that, right? If you have a q squared raised to the 3rd power, you just multiply them to get q to the 6th. Now I have this as a quotient. I can rewrite, right, a quotient as the division from one single logarithm. So therefore this would be log base m of y to the 7th. Oops, I'm sorry. Let's rewrite this better. Of y to the 7th divided by q to the 6th. And I'll just put those in parentheses so you know that is the argument there. And there you go. So it's basically just doing the last problem backwards. Question number 4. Basically, we're just trying to add these. Well, whenever you're adding, guys, fractions, rational expressions, you got to have the common denominator. So in this case, 3 and 15, they're going to have a common denominator of 15. Well, I already have 15 over here. So all I need to do to get a common denominator is just multiply by 5 over here. So therefore, that's going to be a 5x over 15 plus 8x plus 1 over 15. Now, to add those two equations, I can just add the 5x and the x, which will give me a 6x plus 1 over 15. And voila. All right, so here's the question that a lot of students were asking. And a lot of students are asking, how do I practice? How do I, do better? Blah, blah, blah. So in this one, the student was saying what their strategy was because they are struggling and this is for the ACT, but guys, this could be done for any math test. They said, my main strategy right now is to use a practice test, study until I know how to do every problem consistently and get a perfect score. Then once I'm able to move on to another practice test and do the same thing. Is that a good idea or should I try something else? All right. So, and you're very welcome for helping me with the algebra. So in my opinion, I would not focus on one practice test at the beginning. What I would do is I would try to do, and I think this is one of those big things that so the thing with the ACT and SAT, and really with any math test, guys, the more you can be exposed to types of questions, different types of questions, I think the better. And yes, I do want you to go back and figure out why you're doing the problem wrong and how you're getting them wrong. But the thing is, I don't want you just to focus on just the one test, right? Or one review. A lot of times students are like, oh, I'll give students a review and they're like, I did the review, I understood it, but I still did poorly on the test. And so, well, yeah, the test, the review is just there to help you, but it's not like it's not there to just give you an A for the test if you know how to do the review. You still have to learn how to work through problems. So I think that's one of the big misconceptions that a lot of students will take is I say, oh, well, if I do the homework and I do the review, then I know everything, right? Or I should get an A on the test. And while, yes, that is a pretty good determinant of students getting A's, I'd say you should be doing the homework and you should be doing the reviews and understanding that. But again, you can still not really understand the information and be able to do that stuff, right? So I would recommend, rather than focusing on one test, let's do 4 tests. So I would do like 1, 2, 3, 4 tests. And again, this could be as many. And again, this could be tasks, quizzes, whatever you have access to. Go online, find whatever else from another school, from another teacher, whatever. But I would try to do it 4 times. And then what I would do is I'd do it once, right? And record your scores. Like you said, you got a 17. I don't know what that means. Or maybe the 17 on the ACT. Okay. Yeah. And then you know what you're going to do is you're going to find your answers, like whatever you got wrong. So you're going to take it the one time, right? And then what I want you to do is take it a second time and then just really try to focus on the ones that you got wrong, right? Study the ones you got wrong, as you mentioned, right? You're trying to improve those problems that you got wrong to really understand it. But I would do it for more than just one test. I would do it for 4 of them, right? And because, again, I don't want you just to regurgitate like knowing how to do everything on one test. I would go through as many different tests as you possibly can. And maybe let's just start with 3 or let's 4. But I think it's really important to maybe like to go through them like 3 times. Like the first time you just do it, right? But then the second time, focus on everything that you got wrong, right? And then the third time, focus on everything you got wrong for the third time, right? So when you see a problem 3 times, it might be just a really hard problem. And, then you can just make that determination if it's worth you spending any more time on or not. Because again, it might be one, if it's something you're not understanding and you got it wrong 3 times in a row, you might be better served focusing on something else than trying to figure out one problem that may or may not be actually on your test. Right. But I think if you give it a lot of these problems 3 opportunities or 3 tries, you're going to feel pretty, a good sense of like preparedness for whatever types of problems that can come your way. Right. But when you only do like one test, even if you do it to like you knowing everything on that test, I wouldn't say that generally is a great way to prepare you, or to say that you're now fully prepared for what's ahead of you, right? So, especially with the ACT and SAT, I mean, there's so many different types of questions that they have at their disposal, like for AP Calc, AP Stats, right? There's so many different types of questions you can be asked. The more examples that you guys can practice, I think is going to be the better. So I think that's one thing that I would recommend from you guys is don't just rely on what has been assigned to you, but keep on working through those problems and getting practice from them. All right, let's get into the next question. Next question is write as a single fraction. Okay, so we have some radicals, and I think the student was asking about rationalizing the denominator. So what I would do in this case is I would simplify the radical. So I can rewrite this as 2 square root of 2, and this would be what? 2 square root of 3, and then minus 3 square root of 3 all over 2 square root of 2. Okay, then what we're going to need to do is get common denominators. Now, hopefully you guys recognize here these 2's do divide out, but I think I'm actually just going to leave that in there because what I'm going to do is I want to get the common denominator here, and the common denominator is a square root, or it's going to be 2 square root of 6. So I'm going to multiply by a square root of 3 here on top and bottom. All right, so then what I have here is a 2 times square root of 2 times square root of 2 be square root of 4, which is 2, all over a 2 square root of 6. And that's going to be minus a 3 times square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 9. So square root of 9 is going to be 3. And then this would be a 2 square root of 6. All right, so this is what? 4 divided by 2 square root of 6 minus a 9 over 2 square root of 6. Which is going to be a negative 5 over 2 square root of 6. And then I would finally rationalize the denominator. So I do rationalize the denominator at the very, very end. And this would be square root of 6 times square root of 6 is going to be 6 times 2 is going to be 12. All right, this one says model the graph shown using the sine function. So we need to understand what the sine function looks like. Right? That's the sine function. And we could say that is 1 period, right? So a period is going to be how long it takes the graph to repeat itself. The amplitude is going to be the half distance from the max to the min. Okay, so that is going to be the amplitude. The phase shift is how far we're shifting it, the graph left or right. And then the vertical translation is how far we're shifting the graph up or down. So we could probably say that it looks like the graph, like if here is, you can see like the sine graph has a intercept at the y-axis at like the inflection point, right? Where it kind of changes its concavity for you calc students. And so you can see, like, I can kind of say that's the inflection point. So it looks like my graph has been shifted right 1, up 1. And these are going to be my phase shift and my vertical shift translation. It looks like how long does it take the graph to repeat itself, which is this period. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So a period of 4. And then we have a amplitude, and that's going to be the half distance from the max into the min. So my max is 4, my min is -2, right? And you can kind of say, well, the max and the min is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and half of that would be 3. All right, last question that was pre-submitted, and this was a fraction one, and it looks like it's probably from somebody's homework. So follow the steps and find the sum of the given fractions using Pictorial model. Write your final answer on the line to complete the given trivia about rice below. So change these to similar fractions by dividing both of the figures in equal parts. Okay, so I think it's important to see that if we're going to add these guys, we need them to be equal distributions, right? And this is 3 of these, and this is 2 of these, but I think hopefully you guys recognize that I could both break these up into 4 squares. So therefore, that would be 3 of the 4, and this would be 2 of the 4. Shade the figures to show the answer and write the fraction for it on the line. Oh, okay. I'm not really sure. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that'd be what, 5/4? No. 3/4 plus 1/2. Got that. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it'd be 5/4. I just want to do the math. What the 3/4? Yeah, and you just multiply by 2 over 2. Okay, 5/4. So that'd be your answer to be 5/4. So, all right. Go to the thing from on that. Let's go ahead and let you guys know from there. Awesome. All right, guys. Actually, I am going to have to call this live stream a little early. As you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather for on tonight. So I am just exhausted. But again, guys, I will be live next week. If you do have questions, go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. You guys can submit them. I'm sorry, I'm just not really up for any more additional Q&A for tonight. I'm just really exhausted. But I will look forward to seeing you guys next week, and also look forward to answering your guys' questions then. All right, guys, have a great rest of your night and week. Cheers.